Hello and welcome to Talking Meds, a podcast from PrescQIPP, engaging conversations about medicines-related dilemmas. I'm your host, Jonathan Underhill, Medicines Clinical Advisor here at PrescQIPP. Hello and welcome to this episode of Talking Meds, where I'm joined by Monica Boulton, and we're going to be talking about the role of social prescribing. Monica is the Strategic Lead for Healthcare Integration and Neighbourhood Health at the National Academy for Social Prescribing, or NASP. With over a decade of experience in social prescribing, Monica initially worked on local implementation before moving into strategic planning and programme delivery on both local and a national scale. She now leads NASP's Social Prescribing Workforce Programme, with a role seeking to promote clinical engagement, drive integration of social prescribing across healthcare systems, and championing workforce development. Monica has extensive experience within a variety of sectors, including the voluntary sector, and is passionate about community development and creative health, with a particular interest in whole system approaches that strengthen collaboration and celebrate diversity. She has a deep belief in the power of social prescribing to improve lives, strengthen communities, and enhance the resilience of healthcare systems. Resilience of healthcare systems is something that I think is really important to all of us working in the medicines world, Monica. So, thank you very much for joining us today. Fascinating to hear about your work and the role of social prescribing. Can we just start? Because I think there maybe is some confusion about what social prescribing is and what it isn't. So there you go.
We'll start with that minor question then, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here to talk about social prescribing today. So I think social prescribing in its broadest sense is a recognition that there are many things that affect our health that medicine or pills can't solve. And social prescribing is a means and a way of connecting people to non-medical support that can address these issues and unmet needs. So things like housing, loneliness, finances, mental health. Essentially, it's a very personalised approach that gives people, or patients as we might call them, that time to understand what matters to them, what barriers they might be facing, what health limiting factors might exist in their life, and a way of mobilising what exists within the community to really support people in that very holistic way. So at NASP, we really recognise social prescribing as an approach, and we helpfully now actually have a globally accepted definition of social prescribing, which really helps us to see the function that it provides. This was kind of founded through a global Delphi study. So I'll just read you that definition now because it's helpful to all kind of ground us in that exact same definition of what we mean. So it is a means for trusted individuals in clinical and community settings to identify that a person has a non-medical, health-related social need and subsequently connect them to non-clinical support and services within the community. And this is the crucial bit, by co-producing that social prescription. So that's a non-medical prescription that will improve health and well-being and strengthen community connections. So I think that this helpfully provides a definition that helps us to describe a variety of different models of social prescribing, including those that we have in England that I'm sure we'll get into the detail of in this conversation today.
Yeah, that is really helpful. So it's the stuff that can't be treated by medicines alone, isn't it? It's all the emotional support and practical support. And we all know that there is always a significant component to many conditions where emotional support is really, really important, whether that's a physical condition or a mental health condition, actually. And there's many physical conditions like pain, for example, where you can treat it with an opiate or a strong painkiller or whatever, but you also need to have those other mechanisms of support in place as well, don't you? And I guess it's all about, and I love the bit about making sure you take into account what matters most to the person. I mean, this is my mantra for the last 15 years of my career. Shared decision making starts with that question. Find out what matters most to that person. And unless you deal with that, you're going to really struggle to help no matter what you prescribe. And we see a lot of this in the National Polypharmacy Programme, where people end up on 15, 20 medicines and no one's actually asked them what really fundamentally matters most to them and where their choices are in all of that. So no, I really like that. So in terms of your background then, Monica, what brought you into this field, into this world?
So it was actually music that brought me into this field. So I am a musician by background. That is what I studied at university, and I actually came down to Kent to specifically look at how music can support people with specific conditions or mental health issues, or learning disabilities as well. So my particular passion is around how social prescribing can and music can support people living with dementia, and the absolute incredible ability that music has to light up so many different parts of the brain that can then support with reducing agitation, that can support recall, that can actually give people living with dementia a space to go in their community where they are totally heard and understood. So that was how I knew social prescribing before I knew what that term of social prescribing was. And really, through doing that work whilst I was at university and then shortly after, was able to see firsthand the difference that can be made when you just are purely there to serve the person in front of you and to treat them as an individual that has got assets rather than deficit. And that's how I guess stumbled across what social prescribing was, and as you said in the intro, have now been involved in it for around a decade, and have been really fortunate to be right on that sort of frontline delivery element of social prescribing, which hopefully is now translating into what I'm doing on that national scale to really ensure that ethos of exactly as you describe what matters remains right at the heart of social prescribing, regardless of where it's embedded within our health system. So I was really fortunate to be involved in one of the sort of pioneering projects of social prescribing down in Kent. And so faced some of those challenges of embedding it within health that might not always naturally have this approach, but have also therefore then had the privilege of seeing quite how far it's come in actually a really short space of time, since it was implemented nationally back in 2019.
Yeah, I didn't know you were a musician by background. That's fascinating. And again, I've seen lots of examples over the years where, especially for people with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, where that sort of group music therapy can be, as you say, can just awaken people from their dementia. And I've got some colleagues up in the northeast who did this with a few care homes. Where you take a choir in and you get people to sing, or you just put records on from the 1930s and 40s and 50s, and people just come to life, don't they? Likewise with animals, taking animals into care settings can be transformational for people. So I really love this sort of thing. So it's things like I've also seen examples where you've got like gardening projects, community garden, where you give people a sense of purpose and a sense of community, because I think most people actually do have that sense of community and like to feel belonged to and belonged with, and just end up isolated for whatever reason, and often through no fault of their own. And facilitating that and giving people that opportunity, a lot of people will just jump at that, won't they?
Yeah, I think that's the real power of taking that strengths and asset based approach. So we often use the term of we're focusing on what's strong, not what's wrong. And that enables a conversation about exactly what you've just described there about how can we increase somebody's confidence by tapping into what brings them joy, what they are passionate about. And that, as you say, relies on not just having one set of types of activities that exist in the community, but we need a really rich and thriving community that sits around what social prescribing is doing to ensure that sort of ecosystem, for want of a better word, can truly support patients that can benefit from social prescribing.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of how this is delivered, what happens on a sort of a local scale? What happens on a national scale around this?
So social prescribing in its, the essence of social prescribing has been around for decades. But it was formalised in NHS through policy back in 2019. And it was essentially, there was a national rollout at that point of embedding social prescribing link workers through primary care networks. So I'm sure many of the listeners on the call are familiar with the additional roles reimbursement scheme, and social prescribing link workers were one of the three personalised care roles that could be recruited through that additional roles reimbursement scheme to support primary care networks to recruit a workforce that could really meet the needs of their local community. So through that scheme, we've now got around 3,300 link workers across the country, which is really exciting. As I say, we've come a really long way in quite a short space of time. But, in addition to that, we're also seeing social prescribing being adopted and embedded in other services beyond primary care. So whether that be a community-based model, so a voluntary sector organisation recruiting a link worker because they may have identified a need among the refugee and asylum community and have recruited a link worker specifically to support that need. There's also a growing presence within secondary care of social prescribing link workers, some really innovative and exciting examples, such as that in St Bart's in London, where they've embedded link workers within their cardiac pathway to support those that where the social determinants of health have really contributed towards that intervention and to help people to navigate that, in discharge teams as well, to support people to navigate the services that are available to them once they've been discharged from hospital. And again, confidence really, really comes into that. We've also seen sector-specific examples of social prescribing. So there was recently a cross-government programme all focused on green social prescribing, and that was about how we can embed social prescribing specifically within mental health pathways and what the nuance of that is required in order for that to succeed. We're now starting to see social prescribing being included in the Connect to Work, Work Well agenda. So social prescribing link workers sitting at the heart of that pathway of supporting people to get into work by understanding what barriers they are facing in that. So though we've seen that national rollout, there is still, I think quite rightly, that variation in how that is delivered locally, depending on what that local need looks like, and embedding link workers across all of those different pathways and different places within both the health and the community systems to reach as many people as possible.
So just to explore that a little bit, in terms of the barriers to access to these sorts of things, I guess there's availability first of all, and I often hear there's a waiting list for access to things like talking therapies and stuff like that. But I guess there's also a potential barrier in terms of if you like, the evidence base for this. So obviously, in my world of medicines, the evidence for medicines do not get onto the market unless there is reasonable evidence that they're effective. Okay, and that drives the whole prescribing of medicines, actually. And then cost effectiveness comes into that from NICE as well. And unless a medicine reaches the threshold for cost effectiveness, it doesn't get approved to be used on the NHS generally. I guess that's different for the things that we're talking about here, for those interventions, where the evidence base, you're not going to get a randomized controlled trial of 2,000 people where, half of them are randomized to community gardening and half aren't, or whatever, are you? I guess my question is, what is the evidence base for these sorts of interventions?
So, I mean, talking of randomized controlled trials, no, it might not always be the most effective or suitable means to evidence the benefits of social prescribing. However, there is a massive European randomized controlled trial that's in motion at the moment that that we'll obviously be NASPA closely involved with, and will be publishing the results of as soon as those are available. So the evidence base is always growing. It's really dynamic. There's always a new evidence paper that comes out almost on a weekly basis at the moment, which is really exciting. But I think there's something about how we synthesize a lot of the evidence that has exists for decades. It isn't news that things like arts, culture, music, heritage, physical activity are good for our health. It's not difficult to find evidence that those things support individuals. And so social prescribing is really sort of tapping into that and helping to formalize that within our healthcare system. So synthesizing the evidence that exists for those things. But then the evidence for actual that means of social prescribing is growing as well. And that's where we look at things like you said, the barriers of waiting lists and waiting times, and actually social prescribing being able to reduce some of those things. But I also think it's important to see it in that more holistic perspective. So social prescribing can't solve some of the housing issues that our nation is facing at the moment. But for that individual, what a member of our link work advisory group described this really well, of ultimately what is being sought after when somebody needs their housing solved is that stability, that security. And so a social prescribing link worker can support that individual to look at other ways whilst they're on that housing waiting list that they can get that security and stability in their lives. And that can then be measured through how confident that individual is, how much life satisfaction they've got, their anxiety and depression being reduced. So there are ways in which we can measure this in a really tangible way to help to continue to grow that evidence base.
Yeah, I heard Andy Burnham talking the other day about the work that they've done in Manchester on sort of like integrating the social care budget and the healthcare budget. And this sounds to me a little bit like that. You almost need to disinvest a little bit in some aspects of what we call healthcare and invest in the social support. You know, care of the elderly wards where people aren't being discharged because there's no social care setting for them. That just seems ridiculous, really, when you think about it. But these things are not easy to fix. That's the other thing to say here as well. It requires a real long-term plan, which I think brings us nicely on to the 10-year NHS plan, because there's lots in there about social prescribing and the role of neighbourhood teams and all of this as well. So I guess, were you excited by what was in the 10-year plan? Because I was, but the proof of the pudding is always in the eating of the pudding, isn't it? So
Indeed.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I mean, for those of us that know and understand social prescribing, again, in that kind of broad sense, as an approach, as something that has been is now increasingly evidenced to work, I was really excited about how you could see that kind of salt and pepper shaker of social prescribing all over that 10-year plan. It's actually only explicitly mentioned a couple of times, but as I say, those principles behind the ambitions, as well as the details of how we might um, achieve the three shifts that I'm sure all know by heart by now, really do highlight social prescribing as fundamental to achieving what has been set out in that plan. So, for example, the plan highlights that many of our health issues stem from those social determinants such as debt, poor housing, finances, etc. And the importance, it talks about the importance of individuals having the right knowledge, the skills, and the support to tackle those things. That's exactly what social prescribing is doing. It's already a key mechanism that is supporting people to navigate these issues that are often presenting in our health system. Another example within the 10-year plan is that they talk about the expansion of talents within the neighbourhood teams, such as scaling new or proven models to adopt those existing practices, such as social prescribing. It talks about stronger integration of NHS and community partners, another thread where social prescribing link workers already exist. They're already acting as that bridge between those two sectors. They're often described as the glue between those two services. And the plan, the other thing that I thought was really exciting is that the plan stresses the importance of that local by default, I think is the term. And the perfect way to do this is by building on what social prescribing models are already doing within the community. I've already described all of the different ways that social prescribing is mobilising and shifting based on what those local community needs. Where it becomes even more exciting is those neighbourhood teams. So social prescribing link workers, I can't remember a talk that I've been to recently where they haven't described social prescribing link workers as a real key mechanism of delivery and a very essential part of those integrated neighbourhood teams. And I think it's really important as, strategic commissioners, local health leaders, those integrated neighbourhood team planners, really recognise the importance of the skill set that link workers bring to the table. So the main delivery mechanism that we've got for social prescribing at the moment is through those social prescribing link worker roles. They've got skills in motivational interviewing. They are creative. They are flexible in how they support people in that truly personalised way. They have an immense knowledge of their local community and what exists. They are experienced in working in partnership, not just with the individuals that are in front of them, but with those massively complex situations that sits around them. So their skills are already embedded, but they actually are quite unique. And that enables them to play that really key role in addressing those non-medical needs across the priority groups that INTs are being set up to support. And I think, as I've already alluded to, but we can perhaps go into this in a bit more detail later on, is the evidence highlights that system leaders their ears should be pricked up to this, that link workers already are making this different, and it must be incorporated into those local delivery plans as that way of addressing patients' needs in that truly holistic sense. So yes, exciting times ahead. But as you say, the proof will be in that pudding that we will hopefully be devouring in the
Yes.
not too distant future.
Indeed. I mean, I think you're right. I think that it is implicit within the 10-year plan. It's sadly not explicit, and often people will, unless something's put in there as a sort of a, a key deliverable, often it gets deprioritized, and that's my concern about this. I'm still waiting for that sort of that operational plan that details exactly what needs to happen by when and by whom, for this to be delivered properly. I mean, you're right as well. The social determinants of health. So Michael Marmot's review from crikey 13 years ago now. It's all over the 10-year plan. It really is. It's all in there. It's all implied in there. And the only way to deliver that is by having really good integrated local teams that are taking account of uh, the social determinants and the social aspects of care as well. So yeah, I think I'm quite positive about this as well, Monica. But again, we are going to have to wait and see, I think.
I think you're exactly right. That word integration is really, really important. And that's why a lot of the work that we've been doing with PrescQIPP over the last couple of years has been looking at exactly what that means to integrate social prescribing and pharmacy practice, to remove those silos, to remove those we sit over here, we perform this role, and we sit over here and perform this role. And actually, we're all working towards that mutual ambition of improving people's health and well-being. So let's align ourselves in the way that we deliver that rather than just that intention and ambition. And that's what I am confident about in terms of the 10-year plan. But I completely agree with your reflections that we do need some metrics and incentives for people to work in a way that, frankly, is different to what we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that, then, I think what would be useful for listeners would be concrete examples of perhaps where this has worked in practice and what's happened as a result of that. So have you got a couple you could share with us?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as I say, there's millions now of examples. So I mentioned that we've got over 3,300 link workers that exist in practice at the moment. I mean, more than that, because that's simply just the R's figures at the moment. And they're supporting over 1 million people a year is some of what some of the latest evidence is telling us. And so that national picture and that national example is really starting to grow. It's been demonstrated to support people have higher confidence in managing their long-term conditions. It is tangibly supporting people with their mental health needs to feel better understood and to reduce anxiety and depression. There's a growing body of evidence of how social prescribing can support people specifically with those that are living with complex and long-term conditions. Locally, then the evidence is also showing us that social prescribing can reduce GP appointments to, in some cases, up to 68%. It's reducing A&E attendances in some areas by over 20%. It's also showing a really positive return of investment. So those kind of national and regional examples are really helping us to kind of harness that evidence. But I agree that sometimes those most powerful examples are those that are the patient story. And there's actually been a couple that have been highlighted by BBC News recently, which is really exciting, including one that was raised by one of our Link Worker Advisory Group members. And he's a guy called Andy Hughes, and he talks about in this article how he has suffered from anxiety and depression for most of his life, but it was the connecting with his link worker that enabled him to get involved in walk and talk sessions, got him involved in volunteering. He talks about how much his confidence began to grow and reflects that social prescribing helped him where medicine couldn't. It was a life-changing experience for him. He was out of work. He's now gaining skills through that volunteering, gaining confidence through that volunteering. A really tangible example of how somebody went from seeing his lifelong experience of anxiety and depression as totally limiting to actually completely turning that around. And now he has hope for the future. So yeah, those individual stories are always the most powerful way to think about the difference that social prescribing can make.
Completely agree. I mean, I was looking at the on the NAS website, and you have an evidence and resources tab there, don't you? Where people are invited to showcase their social prescribing innovations, and there's a long list of them. So we'll put a link in the show notes to them. I would really encourage listeners just to go and have a look, and you will be absolutely astonished at the results that you see here. This is a classic example for me of failure demand, where we're just not investing in this sort of intervention up front. And as you say, as a result of that, it's creating more workload down the line, whether it's A&E, whether it's, as I said, care of the elderly wards, unable to be discharged, whether it's acute admissions because people have undergone a crisis that actually potentially could have been anticipated and dealt with proactively. So I think there's a real opportunity here for us to do something about this. So I mean, we have talked about the future a little bit with the 10-year plan, but in particular, what does the future hold for social prescribing and maybe for the role of NASP within that then?
Yeah, so there's some really exciting developments that we're seeing, not just at home, but around the world. So last week was Social Prescribing Day, our favourite day of the year here at at the National Academy. And on that day, we've just been given World Health Organization Collaborating Centre status, and we're now the Collaborating Centre for Social Prescribing Policy and Development. So expansion will continue across the globe. We are seeing examples in Canada, in Singapore, in India, in Australia, really innovative and exciting examples of how people are embedding social prescribing within their health systems and of course beyond. And England are now recognised as very much leading the way in that. So really exciting that we're at a really exciting moment in social prescribing, having just been designated as that centre. In terms of, I guess, what I hope to see from the future is that as we move towards more strategic commissioning models, that we see social prescribing as a key mechanism to achieve some of the outputs and outcomes that across health and social care we are ultimately aiming to achieve. I think social prescribing is becoming central to how we deliver care. It's not being seen as something that sits over here or sits in one sector or is only appropriate for certain individuals, that actually it really is central and embedded within that. And so that would be my hope, I guess, is to see social prescribing fully embedded across all care pathways, and the opportunity for individuals to have a conversation that is purely focused around what matters in whatever way, shape or form that might take, that is there and embedded within all pathways. And obviously the work that we're doing with PrescQIPP is one of our efforts to really help to achieve that. And then I think the other part of it is that importance and recognition that we are starting to see grow and become within the policy documents that are emerging about the importance and recognition of the VCFSE sector, and the fact that that needs to be thriving, it needs to be well resourced, it needs to be sustainable in terms of the investment that goes into that for these things to achieve. And as you said just now, we need an expansion of these roles. Link workers are seeing well above what they thought they were going to be see when this role was first implemented. And so we need to expand those roles to keep up with the demand, but also ensure that that conversation remains a crucial part of any healthcare conversation. So yeah, so I think the future is really bright for social prescribing, like I say, not just here in the world, but those specifically are my hopes and what NASP are working on over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, interesting talking about the VCSE, so the voluntary care and social enterprise sector. There's lots of people like me towards the end of their career, who have a little bit of free time and they want to give something back. And actually, the voluntary sector, I think, is a real. I think there's a whole load of people out there who are very willing to give up their time if it's for in a good cause, actually. And I really, really hope we start taking that seriously in terms of a way that we can help support these sorts of things. So no, I think this is really there's a real opportunity here, I think, to do something here. So just to finish off, Monica, this has been fantastic, by the way. But just to finish off, what do you think the three things that clinicians perhaps can do to get up to speed about social prescribing?
Yeah, well, there's loads of things, so difficult to pick three, but the three that I would particularly highlight is the webinar series. So we did a 7-part webinar series with PrescQIPP last year, and all of those recordings are on the PrescQIPP and NASP's website. And that takes you through the whole journey of social prescribing, right through from what is the concept of it, what's the policy that surrounds this, all the way through to what does the social prescription actually look like, and how can I embed this within my practice as a healthcare professional. So really encourage you to set aside some of your CPD time to look at that webinar series. And if you make it all the way through that webinar series, you will have the opportunity to become a social prescribing champion. But this is something that can also you can also apply to outside of that as well. So our social prescribing champion scheme is a way for you to be recognised in terms of the awareness raising that you're already doing around social prescribing, and it's targeted at clinicians. So the resources that we develop as part of that programme are all targeted towards supporting healthcare professionals to better understand social prescribing and be equipped to kind of spread the word. So we've also got some CPD opportunities through some e-learning modules. There's a monthly newsletter, you get a lanyard. So do sign up to that programme if it's something that you're interested in. And then I think the third thing would be to sign up to NASP's updates, whether that's through following our LinkedIn page or signing up to our newsletter. We have a clinical advisory group here at NASP, of which Carol Roberts, the CEO of PrescQIPP, is part of, and all of the work that we do with that group will be shared through those means. So I would encourage you to sign up to that. It's where we share all of the latest evidence that's coming about social prescribing, all of the different ways to get involved, and the latest exciting innovations that you highlighted earlier as well, Jonathan. So watch the webinar series, sign up to become a social prescribing champion, and take a look at our social media and newsletter sign-ups as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Monica. So I did the webinars about a few months ago now, and was astounded not only at the quality of them, but just at how much I learned from that. And this is me, I've been one of the proponents of person-centered care for years and years. I learned lots from the webinar series. What I didn't do was go forward to be a social prescribing champion. So maybe I'll do that as a result of this conversation.
You would be more than welcome to get your badge and lanyard as a champion, Jonathan.
Next time I go to a conference, I will wear the lanyard proudly and extol the virtues of social prescribing. Monica, that's been absolutely delightful to talk to you. Your passion for this comes through loud and clear. It really does. If people can't be inspired by you, then crikey, there's no chance for people. There's no chance for humanity, frankly.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I could talk about this forever. So it's been good to chat through it with you today, Jonathan. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Okay, guys, see you later. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next episode of Talking Meds from PrescQIPP, engaging conversations about medicines-related dilemmas. Please follow us on LinkedIn and Blue Sky to join in with the discussions, and email us on talkingmeds@prescript.info with your feedback or suggestions for future topics or guests. Please don't forget to register for access to the PrescQIPP website for all of our excellent resources.